Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you happen to be around the world. Welcome to another Solid Academy live stream. My name is Nathan Ingram, and I'm the host here at Solid Academy, and I'm joined today by accessibility expert Jen Harries. Welcome, Jen. Glad you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, we're talking about a fun topic that has a lot of interest, especially in folks doing client work in the WordPress world, and that is doing a quick audit for accessibility. Lots of things to talk about today. Let me just invite everyone, if you're joining us just now, open up the chat and say hello. The link bundle is waiting on you there, and many things to talk about, including this page we're looking at here, Jen. What all is here for folks to take a look at?
So this is the quick audit page. And here I have a whole bunch of information all about quick audits, from the done for you service with a report to the DIY scorecard. I have links and video and transcript and summary notes from previous times that I've done this presentation, but today I'm going to mix things up a little bit and do it a little differently. And I'm going to do it with a lightning audit live, and then also discuss that and how that ties into a more detailed audit and the differences between those three. And I've also got a bunch of video guides on how to do a quick audit here on this page.
Yeah, very good. And Jen is powering through some illness today, so we really appreciate you being with us and proceeding with this live stream. If you're not familiar with Jen, she has a lot of credentials when it comes to accessibility. She is a DHS trusted tester for Section 508. She speaks everywhere and runs, among other things, the Baltimore WordPress Meetup. Jen has an excellent package of resources available for those of us that are doing client work with WordPress here at easya11yguide.com. How do you pronounce? Would you say A11Y? What do
Easy
you say?
Alley Guide. So
Alley.
A11Y, the quick story is that back when Twitter first started, it was really short on what you could put in a tweet. Everyone was trying to condense everything down. So they took longer words and they chopped out the middles. So A11Y is 11 letters chopped out between A and Y. Like internationalization is I18N, because you chop out 18 letters in the middle. And A11Y also has gotten nicknamed Ally because you're an ally of accessibility.
I just learned that. Thank you very much. Very good. So easyalleyguide.com. Take a look at that. Again, many people just now joining us in Zoom. So I'd invite you into the chat where we've just posted our link bundle once again. The link to the page we're looking at here with all the resources for today is there. We are recording this as well, and that replay will be available in about an hour on the Solid Academy website. The link also there in the chat. And one other thing, we'll have another live stream with Jen coming up in about 3 weeks on making emails accessible for all. And I'd invite you all to register for that. The link is there for you. And this is a fun story because we're actually going to take apart an email that the folks here at Solid WP sent out that was inadvertently not accessible. So we're going to just kind of pull the curtain back and see how we can fix our own stuff. And Jen has been gracious to do that for us.
And yeah, it is not at all exclusive to Solid. I have seen tons of big companies, including Fortune 500s, which are sending out emails that are having a lot of issues. So this is something that small people sending out emails, big people sending out emails. These are just some really common gotchas that are impacting a lot of people.
Indeed. So all those links are waiting on you there in the chat. Jen, give us a quick overview of where we're heading today, and then we'll start going.
So we are going to look at one of my favorite sites to audit into is the Maryland Tax Connect website. This is reliably with a number of accessibility issues. And we're going to start out by doing a lightning audit on it. And so lightning audit kind of came from the name the Lighthouse audit from Google, because that gives you a score, but that score does not tell you much about whether it's good or bad or ugly. So I put together the lightning audit, which is a super fast accessibility test that allows us to get that good, bad, or ugly. So first we're going to do the lightning audit, then we're going to go ahead and do the quick audit, and we're going to use the scorecard, which is on that quick audit links page. And then after we do that, we're also going to take a look at a more detailed assessment report on that same webpage, so we can kind of look at 3 different types of audits.
Very good. So a long way to go today, and Jen will dive right in here in a moment. Let me just invite everyone again, if you're just joining us in Zoom, to open up the chat. I'm going to drop once again in the link bundle that has all these links for you. And finally, if you have questions along the way, we'd invite you, rather than using the chat, please use the Zoom Q&A to ask your questions. You can find that by mousing over the shared screen, clicking the Q&A icon, and then just ask your question there. I'd encourage you just to keep that Q&A window open throughout, because you'll have the opportunity there to upvote the questions of others, and we'll take those questions at the end in the order of upvotes. So with that, Jen, I'll disappear. Let's get into quick audits.
Excellent. Okay, there we go. So the lightning audit is where we're going to start, and this is the fastest audit. This is a preliminary audit when you really want to get a ballpark of the website. This is not a detailed audit. This isn't going to give you some nice report that you could show a client, but this is really great as a first audit to say, does this website need a lot of work? Is this website in decent shape? And give you that really quick answer. You can do the lightning audit on several different pages of a website, looking at the home page, a blog page, cart, checkout, just several different pages, and that can give you kind of in 10 minutes about a quick picture of the site and what kind of shape it's in, which then can lead you down what kind of accessibility route you want to pursue and what sorts of actions you want to look into. So this is in the link bundle that Nathan already shared. And so it's just 7 tests. Each test gets 1 point. So we're going to go ahead and get started. First test is, does an accessibility statement exist? And the reason for this is companies that prioritize accessibility put an accessibility statement on there because they want people to contact them if there's a problem. They actually hopefully care. And we do see an accessibility link in the footer. So they get 1 point so far, 1 out of 1. Next thing, does the skip to content link pass? So to test that, I click my cursor into the URL bar, and on my keyboard, I hit the key Tab. It appears to me that nothing has happened. What should have happened is I should see a skip to content link. So here over on my site, if I put my cursor there and I hit Tab, the very first thing I see is a skip to content link. It is focused. It is easy to read. It meets contrast. So that's what I expected to see, and I saw nothing. So we have 1 out of 2. The next thing here is the site free from autoplay and continuous animations? And it is. So we're now at 2 out of 3. Is there a good focus state? So I am going to hit Tab and go through and see if I can clearly see the focus state. Yes, yes. It is blinking, which I will pass. Yes, I can see it on the home. I can see it blinking on these fields. So we are going to go ahead and give that a pass. Next up, so now we're at 3 out of 4. Does the main menu work with the keyboard? Well, one thing I noticed while I was hitting Tab is that this main menu here never got activated. So we are going to give it a 0 on that. We're now at 3 out of 5. Does the color contrast look good? Well, user ID, password, these fields, that color contrast does not look good. The search field also. This sign up is probably right on the border for whether or not it passes, so it doesn't pass. We're at 3 out of 6. And last up, are links and buttons obvious? Well, this here is bolded and a link, and this here is bolded and not a link, which means that no, links are not obvious. So the total score is 3 out of 7. And what does that actually mean? Well, here we are, 2 to 3 points. It needs a large amount of remediation work. And we should consider whether remediating or rebuilding is going to be a better plan. If we're looking at remediation, the cost will be in the neighborhood of 40 to 60% of the build cost as a ballpark. So now we are going to head in and do the quick audit. But first I'm going to have a sip of tea. So now we are moving on to the DIY quick audit scorecard. I have a more detailed scorecard that allows you to note where the issue was found, so the sourcing of the issue, and also put in notes, but this is the simple free version. So accessibility statement. We did find an accessibility statement and it didn't have any issues with the look of it. It's right down here in the footer. Next thing, we're going to check for cookie and privacy policies. Are those easily found and can we easily get to them? Well, I don't see a privacy policy here. It might be under your rights as a taxpayer. Oh, that's a PDF. So no, that's not a privacy policy. So they're collecting information and content and there's no privacy policy. So we are going to say issues found because the policy is missing. Next up, we are going to check for alt text on images. So there's a number of different ways to do that. The first is, of course, find some images and just hit inspect on your browser. So here we are. The alt text on this is Comptroller of Maryland, but the logo says Maryland Tax Connect. So that is not good. The image, especially since it is part of a link, should clearly say where this goes to. It does not go to the Comptroller of Maryland's website. It comes here to Maryland Tax Connect website, where we already are. So that's bad alt text. And the second thing is it has a title, and it should not have a title. Images should not have titles. Just generally speaking, titles are a problem. So we are going to say issues found. On some screen readers, if you have both alt text and a title, it will read both, and that can be rather annoying. Next, we're going to check for form markup. So again, I already have my inspector open. Here we are. So what I'm looking for is form markup basics. So label for user ID, and the input field is labeled with user ID. It should not have a placeholder, and this label should be visible. You can see here that it's display none, which means it's hidden from everything, including assistive technology. So already we have multiple issues going on here. The hover state on this login button is a problem. And I can also take a look at the search form. Up here we have a form, input type search placeholder. Now, when you have both a placeholder and an ARIA label on the same element, the screen reader can double read. And depending on how the search button is coded, oh, good, we've hidden the search button from assistive technology. So it has no name or label for assistive technology because it's been hidden. So we can say we have several different failures on forms. Issues found. Links and link states. So we already discussed that we had some issues with links and link states. So links should be clearly identified and easy to tell. They should also have hover states to show interaction. The basic rule, if I can click it, then it should show an interaction on hover. If I cannot click it, it should not show an interaction on hover. And that's a general usability as well as an accessibility issue because let's face it, we've all been on the internet for a long time. If something changes when you hover on it, you expect that you can click it. It's pretty common sense. So we have issues here. Keyboard focus state. So we had already looked at that in the lightning audit, and we're going to say that one's fine. Skip link for keyboard users. We already looked at that in the quick audit, and that has issues. Navigable menu. Again, we looked at that and issues. Text sizing with zoom. So the first thing we're going to do is here in a Chromium-based browser, I'm going to plus up to 200%. And wow, this is bad. So we've determined that there are issues. The other part is to test to 400% text only, or sorry, 200% text only zoom on Firefox. I can tell you it has issues as well. In Firefox, all you do is you just go to the zoom and you can select text only. And if you take a look at the video that I have here on the quick audit page, it'll actually walk you through that. Next up is page titles and headings. Well, the page title is home. That is not particularly helpful to people. Home could be any website in the world. Whereas if you take a look at the links on my site, it says DIY Quick Audit Scorecard Easy Alley Guide. Okay, I can easily identify my tabs and differentiate between them. We would also be checking for headings. This should be a heading, but this is actually a link or an image. Sorry. This is an image. It is not a heading. And because of that, this is having heading issues. There's a distinct lack of headings on this web page. Issues found. Color contrast for text. Now, we already talked about in the lightning audit that we had color contrast issues here. A quick thing on Chromium-based browsers. If you're using a Mac, Command-Shift-C, like Charlie. If you're using a PC, Control-Shift-C. So when I do that, it will bring up this awesome little thing that can tell me about color contrast. Now, it can't always programmatically determine the color contrast. Here on this parts, we can see that it's passing those different pieces of text. But you see, for example, on the login button, it can't programmatically determine it. So I don't see any information about the color contrast. The better coded websites, you can see the information more often. Poorly coded sites, you can see it less often. And I'm just going to hit escape on my keyboard to turn that off. So we found issues. As a note, the majority of tools cannot find color contrast on placeholder text. They're not able to check for that and determine it. So that you need to visually check for yourself. I have a Mac, so there is a really, really little tool that is so handy. I use it all the time. It is called Digital Color Meter. And this tool can be found in your applications and then the utilities folder. And again, it's called Digital Color Meter. And it gives me a great little color sampler that I can use anywhere on my computer and sample off the screen. It is so handy. So next up, we have no continuous autoplay, animations, or visually disorienting content. And like we said in the lightning audit, we didn't find any. Closed captions and transcripts. I'm going to mark that as not applicable. There was no media that we found on this page. And I'm going to just skip the quick screen reader test today just because, well, one, I'm not feeling great, and two, it can be a little tricky with Zoom. I can, however, assure you that issues will be found. Then I just click Calculate Score, and there are 10 issues. And you can also get this content all sent off in an email. So understanding the score, 6 or more issues, the website is at high risk of losing business due to issues, and I'd recommend that you go ahead and do a full gap assessment of the site to create the best course of action. Now, if I'm doing the quick audit myself, I will use the other tool on my site, which has a bit more detail. And that one, I will list off the source, and I will usually include some notes in for what's going on. The source is really helpful because, for example, on a lot of WordPress sites, the menu might be part of a theme or a specific plugin. And one of the best ways to remediate that situation is to just replace that element. So for the, also there's forms. And again, sometimes if the problem is with a form, the best way to deal with it is just to replace that element completely with something that is more accessible. So now we are going to take a look at the assessment report that I did for this same page with accessibility insights for web. This is a extension. It's available in the Chrome app extensions, and it can create some quick little tests, and it can also create rather detailed reports. This report, if you can see my little scroll bar, this is a tiny little scroll icon because this is just pages and pages and pages long. And I like this one because, well, one, it's easy to use. And two, it is open source, it's well maintained. Microsoft is the one who actually maintains this. And it tests compared to WCAG 2.1 AA and 2.2 AA. And you'll see even on their automated checks that they only had 2 failures on the automated checks. And I want to point out that I did run a Google Lighthouse on this, and it scored a 94 out of 100. So it sounded pretty good. But you can see that we then found lots of issues on the manual check. And you can see that we have keyboard issues and landmark issues, heading issues, repetitive content issues, link issues, whole bunch of problems with some of their custom widgets. Errors and error status issues, that's related to the forms. Page navigation issues, image issues. So, but you'll see that things like audio video content passed without any issues. They had semantic HTML problems and, of course, contrast issues. So a lot of the same things that we found here in this quick audit scorecard, we found in a lot more detail and a lot more explanation and a lot more write-up here on this more detailed report. So as we can tell, the quick audit was done in about 15 minutes, and this assessment took about an hour. So that's one of the reasons why I like the quick audit, is because it's so fast and we can get a picture of the website. Because if there are a lot of accessibility issues, if there are big errors, then frequently it doesn't make sense to go into a really detailed assessment. I generally use this more detailed assessment as a verification. So once we've already done a bit of work on a site and it's passing the quick audit, then I normally get into verification audits, and that's so that organizations can have documentation that this website was tested on this date and it did this well. And that's really good for organizations to have as a history of what they've done and to show evidence that they've been working on situations. This can be really helpful in the event someone does want to file an accessibility grievance with you. So I generally call 4 categories of audits. The preliminary audit, and that is what the lightning audit is for. And that just, you're trying to get a ballpark. Is this good? Is this a mess? And it just gives you that quick preliminary ballpark without taking a lot of time and going into the details. But as we can see from going through the details of this page, it definitely does need quite a bit of remediation work, and that's not going to be a small amount of effort to get all that cleaned up. Then the next type of audit is a working audit. And the purpose of this is to provide useful, actionable data so that we can work on the issues and get to resolution of the issues. And that is what the quick audit is for. Because finding out that there are issues, tracing the source of the issue, and when I do quick audits, I will usually tell people what they need to do to fix it, i.e., the form plugin you're currently using is known to have a whole bunch of issues. You should really replace it. Here are a couple of good options, so that they have an idea of what exactly they can do to make things better. And then we have the verification audit. And this is used really normally at the end of a process to verify that things are in fact at a pretty good state. And then finally, there's the category that I like to call junk audits. And these provide a bunch of data, but it's not useful or actionable. An example would be if I went to Screaming Frog and I just got a list of all of the alt text on the entire website. Alt text is context sensitive. If an image is being used as a link, it needs to have alt text that says where that link goes to. If the image is in the content, it might be decorative. In another instance, that same image could have useful meaning. It all depends, and it's all context sensitive. So just getting a report of the image URL and the alt text associated is not beneficial. It's just a lot of noise and information that's doesn't tell me what to do, doesn't tell me if it's good or bad. It just says it's there. And I can't determine from that information if we're in a good or a bad situation. So I call those junk audits, and we want to avoid those. All right, Nathan.
Very good. Super helpful information, Jen. I love to watch a pro work through an audit like this because it shows me things that I just haven't even thought about before. Really, really appreciate your time today and powering through the cold that you're struggling with. We have a number. Are you still with me, Jen? Oh, did we lose Jen? Oh, there she is.
Sorry, I just needed to blow my nose, so I turned off the camera for a minute.
No problem. No problem. So great comments in the chat. Stacy saying she's going to have to watch a couple more times. Indeed. And we will have this replay up in about an hour after we finish up, somewhere around 3 o'clock Central. So we have a bunch of questions stacked up. But before we get there, Jen, I just want to talk about all the resources that you have available for solo developers, agencies, however people label themselves. If you're doing accessibility work for clients, you've got some excellent resources. Can you talk about those just for a minute?
Absolutely. Let me share. One sec. So I have a ton of information on my Learn page. And here I have links to some useful articles. And I also have a whole bunch of presentations that I've done on different parts of accessibility, the quick audits, speeding up your processes with accessibility, how accessible are WordPress forms by default. I did this one for the WordPress accessibility meetup, and I dug into a bunch of the top form builders and how accessible are they when you just drop them in and click save. CSS Tiny Tips. This one people have loved. It is a collection of little CSS tips to make your site more accessible. Just lots of little snippets that you can drop into just about any project. So in addition to this, I have a blog, and the blog has all sorts of different information. I have the US Agency's Guide to Web Accessibility, and I talk about a ton of different aspects of web accessibility, specifically for US agencies, what it is, how sites become inaccessible, BPATs, ACRs, the different rules and regulations, and what exactly you should do. And then I have a little sneak peek as something that is coming out at the end of this month. I've had a membership program on my site, and so anyone who is an existing member will get a note that they're being rolled into this. The agency accessibility system, and this is going to be a system with a mountain of SOPs on exactly how to do different parts of accessibility. And it starts with information on how to sell accessibility. So I'm going to walk through things like my 3 yeses framework, where we get people to say yes to the results of accessibility. So we get them to say yes to establishing goals for their website. And then we bring in accessibility as the means to achieve those goals, instead of trying to bring it in as this big, scary behemoth. We turn it into the means to get to the place that you want to be. And so I will be announcing this on my newsletter, and you can sign up for my newsletter on the footer of my site. Any page on my site, it's in the footer. I'll be announcing it. There will be probably for most of February, we'll have this pricing, but then the pricing is going to go up. So people can hop in there early if they want to.
Very good. And Jen gave me a little sneak peek behind some of the things that are here in this membership as we were getting ready to go live today. And it is quite impressive, the collection of tools that are there. So sign up for the newsletter and take advantage of that offer before the price goes up. One other thing, Jen, if folks are, maybe they're a solo developer, small agency, whatever, and they don't really have the resources to invest in becoming an accessibility expert, can they just hire you?
Absolutely. So as part of the agency accessibility system, you get signed up on my site and you get an account, which gives you discounts on the public pricing. So that means that if you want to talk to your clients and say, hey, we're going to be adding accessibility, we're going to be using this expert to actually implement it, they can look on the site and they can see what the price is. The price to you is a discount on that, so that when you're reselling it, you can resell it at list and, still come out as a win.
Very good. Well, thanks for this information, Jen, and folks take advantage of all those things that she's talked about. And now let's turn to the Q&A. If you have not yet seen the questions that have been asked, folks, open that Zoom Q&A. You can ask your questions and then upvote the questions of others. So let's start here with a question from Paul. Can you explain, Jen, why like one of the things in the quick audit was, is there a privacy policy? Is there a cookie policy? We know that's a good practice, but how does that relate to accessibility?
Yep. So that's a question that I've heard lots of times. Number one is if a company doesn't have a privacy policy, they are probably missing a whole lot of legal requirements. It's kind of a good metric to determine, do they know much of anything about what's legally required on websites? Because many US states, Canada, Europe, Australia, a whole bunch of countries all require that these are there. And the other thing is, companies have been sued for inaccessible privacy policies and terms of service. And if those aren't accessible, courts have ruled that if the person can't access the terms of service or the privacy policy, they are not beholden to them.
Interesting.
They can't possibly have accepted something that they couldn't read.
Interesting.
And therefore, the court has ruled that it doesn't matter. Your terms don't apply. They couldn't have agreed to it. Your terms have been thrown out.
Wow.
Which includes like limits of liability and includes things like jurisdictions and all of that tossed out the window. Doesn't matter.
That is an interesting take. I hadn't thought about that. Another question here from Paul. How or where can one learn about the required tags, erroneous tags? For example, you mentioned the alt tag and the title tag in an image. How would we learn more about that?
Yep. So the first thing is semantic HTML. In HTML5, we have lots and lots of different elements. We have things like the button element. Well, when we have something that performs a function, submits a form, pops open a accordion, changes a tab, things like that, we should be using buttons because there's a whole bunch of browser supported stuff that's done for us by using the correct HTML. So we always want to use the right HTML. And there's a ton of information about HTML and HTML5 if you go to my Learn page and you look into the links for the forums that I did, the forums meetup for WordPress accessibility group. I put a ton of information on semantic HTML into the links for that, including a whole bunch of references to places where you can get pre-coded HTML and CSS, including some JavaScript stuff for things like accordions and forms and a bunch of other things. But it's really about learning and digging into semantic HTML, and that requires just going back to the basics and learning HTML. W3C has a W3C schools, and their schools have courses on HTML. And it's a great thing to go back and take a look at those courses because many developers have realized, oh, shoot, I forgot a lot of things that are already there and available to me, but I didn't even realize I just forgot about them.
Interesting. So the post you referenced on your site, Jen, that was for, I think you said the meetup group. Can you tell us where that is once again, or drop in a
It
link?
is on the Learn page.
Okay.
So it's just easyalleyguide.com/learn. And on that page is the forums meetup.
Got it. All right. Jocelyn has asked a question. It's actually two-part. First, kind of going back into what Paul just asked, why is it that image titles are a problem? I thought they were good for SEO.
Nope. So image titles have not been recommended for use for years. You want to use image alt. Image alt is what you should be using for SEO purposes. And image alt should, W3C actually has a really good instructional chart on it, which I think I even have up. Yes, I do. Copy. So I can just toss that into the chat. This is a image decision tree, and it will
Look at
help
that.
you determine exactly what to do based on the case. So this gives you a very simple set of questions and tells you what to do based on your answer. So does the image contain text? No. Continue. Yes. Okay. Well, answer all of these questions then. So, for example, on the Maryland Tax Connect, the Tax Connect logo had text on it and it was functional because it was functioning as a link. So they even have a specific example, logo image within a link text, and exactly what to do based on that.
Huh. That's a great resource. Thanks. And Jocelyn's second question was related to movement on a page. Um, the question says, we use slideshows on a main landing page and videos on our product and tutorials. Is it the autoplay or auto advance that's the issue? And, like maybe a carousel view of testimonials.
Yes. So there are a couple possible issues. One is flashing content. Flashing content can make people nauseous. In a small set of cases, there are people who have seizure disorders, which are triggered by flashing lights or strobing lights. That is a small percentage of the population, but you don't want to give anyone a seizure. There's specific rules. It's 3 flashes per second is the issue threshold. General rule, don't go anywhere near that because you'll make people nauseous, even just going near it. But moving and auto advancing content, that is really triggered or really associated with nausea, which can be anything from someone having the flu to people who have vestibular disorders. Over half the population will have a vestibular issue at some point in their life. It's a pretty sizable number of people, and there are many people who it's just an ongoing issue. It's disorienting. It can make them ill, and we don't want to do that. So if you have a carousel or something, the best thing to do is don't have it autoplay. Give people the little arrows, let them click it. Norman Nielsen Group has done studies. People don't click through carousels. People don't read them. Let's be honest. They had done a study on sliders and they found that having a slider was less effective than just having a static hero area.
Exactly. Yeah. A follow-up from Jocelyn. It says we use both alt and title. So are you saying title is just bad for images, or is it
Correct.
okay if alt is also
Delete
used?
delete the title text.
Yeah. That's
It
an
will
old, yeah,
yeah, it will cause some of the screen readers to double read, which is really annoying.
yeah. And doesn't really give any practical benefit for human readers or
No,
SEO for that matter.
correct.
And yeah, it should be able to be deleted in the media library in WordPress, I believe.
It depends on the theme that you're using.
Yes. And like particularly in the classic editor, it would pull that information once when the
So
image was dropped in, and then
so
it's there forever.
many of the themes will ignore title. So it doesn't matter if you have it there in the WordPress media library or not. They just
Huh.
don't put it in. But there are a few themes that will auto put it in, which is not what we want.
Not great. Brian has a question about the skip to content. One of the
Yes,
first things there in the audit. Does that require some JavaScript, or I believe many
does
things
not.
have it built in, right?
The skip to content link, there is code easily available out there. The theme that I have, the Kaya theme, is open source and on GitHub. And you can go ahead and just read the code. but it's basically just code with screen reader text on it. It's got a specific screen reader CSS class, and that makes it hidden until the screen reader activates it. And that is just HTML and CSS.
Excellent. Paul would like to know, why are there different parameter tests for different browsers, 200 versus 400, etc.?
It is two different WCAG criteria. That's why. One WCAG
Got it.
criteria says that text and text alone needs to be able to be increased to 200% without loss of functionality. And that is where we normally use the Firefox browser, because Firefox has that built into the browser, so it's really easy to use. And then the other one is the 400%, and that is basically for people who are using a normal full screen zoom. So I will normally use the Chrome browser to test that. And that goes up to 400% to basically give them the mobile view on desktop for people who have poor eyesight or who forgot their reading glasses, because 79% of the US adult population needs vision correction. And most of those people are farsighted, which means that they can read things that are far away easier than things that are close up. Things that are close up are usually blurry. So what happens is, if they don't have their reading glasses with them, a lot of them will set their phones and whatnot to really large text so that they can read that.
Interesting. Miriam is asking about typography in an audit. So some typography, some fonts are hard to read and can create accessibility issues.
Yes.
Is there a reason that wasn't in the audit?
Typography is, generally speaking, less of an issue on most of the sites, and it's very easy to fix. That's one of those things that if I see it, I'll note it as well, but honestly, I've seen it less often. Normally, the issue is the contrast of the text. A lot of times people are using the really popular fonts, and quite frankly, generally, most of the popular fonts are pretty readable. The web-safe fonts are usually quite readable. A lot of the popular ones on Google are quite readable. So it hasn't been a huge thing that I've been seeing a ton of lately. A lot of people are realizing that people have come to your website to read, and they do not care about your font. They just want to read it.
Question here from Therese. On the autoplay item, would that mean it's not a good idea to embed rotating testimonials from a Google My Business page?
Correct.
Yeah, and even further on that, you have to be really careful about copying the text of those testimonials, because it's actually a copyright issue with Google.
There's a whole bunch of rules around Google and Google reviews. There's like extensive listings if you actually read into Google, and a lot of people aren't aware of those and have gotten in some serious hot water because of that.
Indeed. Okay, Jen, you ready for a slow pitch across the plate? Would you recommend a tool like Accessibility or not?
Absolutely not. And there's a couple of reasons why. Number one, it doesn't improve the experience for people with disabilities. There is a browser extension called Accessibility that is really popular with people who have disabilities. It automatically disables the accessibility overlays from the major vendors and kills
That's
them all.
fantastic.
So they don't interfere with the website anymore. Number two, I have personally seen Accessibility and many of the other tools make it worse. One of the things that they're really bad at is keyboard testing. There has been a number of studies. DQ did one with over 13,000 web pages. Automated testing is really poor at detecting keyboard issues. So if automated testing can't detect it well, how well do you think they're going to know if they broke it? Not
Yeah,
at all.
not well.
And the FTC has recently fined Accessibility and told them to stop lying to their customers. The FTC literally said that they have misled customers, they have given them false beliefs, and is going after them for false advertising. They have been sued, including in class actions multiple times, because 20 to 25% of the websites that are being sued are using overlays. And guess what? Of the overall number of websites, it is a whole lot less than 20% that are using these overlay tools. So you're actually much more likely to be sued if you're using an overlay.
Mm.
And the European Disability Council put out a specific statement saying that accessibility overlays will not make your website compliant with European legislation.
Indeed.
So,
Couldn't see an FTC fine happening to a better company, in my view here. $1 million
yes.
fine. We just covered that as a story during our news roundup here yesterday. It's crazy.
It's nothing compared to the lawsuits they've dealt with.
Mm, yeah. Question here from Co. What is a reasonable price range for these kinds of services from quick audits to full audits?
So obviously that's going to vary quite a lot. But I, for example, have pricing listed right on my website for all of this stuff. And that's the public pricing, so that doesn't include agency discounts as part of the agency accessibility system. But they start at 160 per page, and also I have gap assessments, which is a quick audit on several different pages, and then it also includes some automated testing on a larger subset of the site. So we'll test on automated 100 or so pages and aggregate that data in with the quick audit on several pages to give a much clearer picture of the overall accessibility of the website and where the major hurdles are. So that one's quite popular.
Very good. Great question from Stacy. Stacy says many of her clients are 1 to 5 person businesses who can't afford the kinds of costs she's seen for accessibility, whatever that means.
Mm-hmm.
My recommendation has been just to identify and fix what you can, but of course they keep getting emails scaring them about lawsuits. What do you say to small, like legitimately small businesses about this?
So the answer is usually I do the lightning audit on a couple of the pages, because then I can get just a picture, like, am I seeing the issues? Am I not seeing the issues? And then prioritize addressing the issues from the lightning audit. You know, quite frankly, who's getting sued in most of these things? They are going to be low-hanging fruit. Almost all the lawsuits are going after the low-hanging fruit, which means they have really obvious accessibility issues that are showing up on manual testing. They are not showing up on, you know, we looked at the Lighthouse score was a 94. The Lighthouse score looked great on the site, but then it hit a 3 out of 7. That's not so good. That shows there are significant issues impacting people.
Yeah, indeed. And nothing's going to replace the manual testing for sure. Now, there are good automated tools out there. For example, Michael's asking a question about Equalize Digital's accessibility checker tool.
Yes.
But Michael says it's not, is it that not? Basically, there's things on your audit that show up that are not part of accessibility checker.
Correct.
How
Yes.
do you, well, do you recommend a tool like accessibility checker? How do you deal with that?
So I use 3 different tools depending on the job, because let's face it, there's multiple tools and they aren't all good at the exact same things. So I use the accessibility checker from Equalize Digital. I use eQualify and I use Accessibility Cloud. And these each have different strengths and weaknesses. But the short answer is automated testing is bad at anything related to the keyboard. Automated testing is generally pretty bad at focus related items. Some automated testing has been shown to be better or worse at things like color contrast. And even in those cases, there are still areas that they usually miss. For example, non-text contrast, which means the borders on buttons and input fields, and basically the general borders on things. The tools are generally terrible at those.
Hmm.
So there's some different strengths and there's some different weaknesses. The automated tools, I definitely use them. They're great because I can test 100 pages to see if there are common issues showing up. So I know that Equalize Digital, their accessibility checker plugin, it can do some checks on inside the PHP of the website to look for some issues because it's already installed as a plugin so that it can access certain things. Equalify, for example, is quite good at finding a lot of the ARIA regions and issues with those that I haven't seen other tools be able to hit well. Accessibility Cloud is good at being able to check and actually scan the PDFs on the site and see if it can automatically define some of those issues. So there are strengths and weaknesses, but a automated audit is not complete.
Great advice. Let's wrap up with one final question, if it's all right, from Karen. This is a really good one, and I imagine that Karen's sentiment in this question is echoed throughout many of the folks who are watching. Karen says, sometimes I feel like walking away from the web world entirely because of accessibility. I know how important it is. I'm a strong advocate for it, but there's so much to learn, and building things the right way takes extra time. She says, I've been incorporating accessibility into websites for 2 years, and it still feels overwhelming. Any words of wisdom for someone who's feeling buried in it all?
Yes. So it is wide and deep, but there are also other things that are wide and deep that we have to deal with, like security. Security is wide and deep. We have monitoring systems for security. We get reports from those monitoring systems. We have to go address those security issues. We have to hire outside help to help us with some of the security problems. We have to consider that when we're looking at plugins. Do they have a good history of having security issues patched? Have they ever had their code reviewed by a professional? You know, this is something that we just have to deal with, is, the fact that security issues exist, they're there, and we have to take tech steps. We have to consider them when we're writing code and building things. We have to consider them in our processes. And the same is true of accessibility. You've got to consider it in your processes. You've got to get it in there. You have to it doesn't have to be this giant many-headed Hydra monster that you're trying to, battle with a toothpick. One of the things that I try and do is get out the SOPs, and I have consulting hours and whatnot, and ask the actual questions that people are having, because a lot of times these aren't as insurmountable as they might seem, but the earlier you can address them, the smaller they are. I've worked with a few different plugin developers, and yes, when we actually sat down and we went through the things, it was just that they didn't know what to look for. They didn't know how to test if they had done it right. They didn't necessarily know which semantics of the HTML to use and different things like that. And they just needed someone to walk them through it.
Yeah. Well, Jen, thanks. A lot of great questions today. Excellent walkthrough of the quick accessibility audit, and we really appreciate your wisdom. Any final thoughts as we're closing up today?
Just start somewhere. It doesn't necessarily have to be the be all, the end all. but you do need to start being aware of it. Just but and don't necessarily think of it as the scariest thing ever. Take a look at that lightning audit. You know, it's 7 steps. It is not like trying to learn how to use a screen reader or something like that. It's those 7 items, and you can start tackling those 7 items. And they aren't necessarily everything, but by tackling those, you do get closer. You do improve the experience.
Very good. Well, thanks again, Jen, for your time and for, I'm reading Jean in the other window here. I appreciate your time and your energy and your wisdom to do this. Thanks for powering through some illness today. Uh, it's been great. Again, folks, we have another live stream with Jen coming up in a couple of weeks, all about making emails accessible. And we're going to pull back the curtain and talk about one of the inaccessible emails we sent unintentionally here from Solid WP Marketing. And that's going to be the starting point. And we'll learn all about how to make our emails more accessible. That's going to be a lot of fun. So thanks again,
Yep.
Jen. Folks,
And
take advantage
again,
of her offer and resources there on her website at easyalleyguide.com.
yep. And for the email audits, again, we're going to have, a simple step-by-step process of things to look for and how to go through them. And this is something that everything from small little brands to Fortune 500 companies, this is a mistake they're all making. And this impacts a far larger amount of your audience than you think it does. And we'll get into all the details and nitty-gritty there.
That's going to be fun. That's coming up on February 11th, about 3 weeks from now. And that link is right there in the chat. Go ahead and click on that now before we shut things down. Thanks for hanging out with us today. We appreciate everybody being part of the learning experience today. That's going to wrap it up. I'm back for members tomorrow for office hours here on Solid Academy, where we go further together.